All right. I'm going to be talking about Thor Love and Thunder. I saw it last night at the 8 o'clock showing. There were a bunch of showings at my theater for this. It is a highly anticipated Marvel movie, I would say, especially after Thor Ragnarok, which was my top 5, and I'm sure it's in a lot of people's top 5, top 10 of all MCU movies. So we had a lot to look forward to with this. Did it live up to the hype? We'll get to that. Before we do so, go ahead, click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Hit the like button. I really do appreciate you all supporting the show. And one last thing, I know I promised some more videos. I will get there eventually. I swear. I'm still trying to figure out what I want this channel to be. I think it's going to be a mixture of, these movie talks / reviews for all the upcoming pop culture related movies that we're getting in superhero movies. Omnibus reviews, maybe some statue reviews, maybe some other top lists of like my favorite covers that have come out for comic books. I'll probably keep doing some trailer reactions. So this will evolve, I promise, into, something more than what it has been these last few months. So expect that coming. And if you're not subscribed, please do so you can get updated whenever I post new videos. Okay. Thor Love and Thunder. As I mentioned, it came out last night, July 7th. This is the 29th film in the MCU franchise, starring Chris Hemsworth. We have Natalie Portman. If you watch the trailer, you know she's in this. And a villain I was really looking forward to, Christian Bale playing Gore the God Butcher. Right now on Rotten Tomatoes, not like it really matters. I don't really care what score movies get on that website when they release. I often find myself at the other end of the spectrum from what critics think. So, but just to let you guys know, it's at a 68% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 85% audience score. That is not surprising. Usually for these superhero movies, we get a higher audience score. What does surprise me is that it's 85% sounds high, but I thought it was going to be in the 90s. And after watching it, I can kind of get why it's getting the score that it's gotten. But overall, it seems like a lot of the MCU superhero movie fans are enjoying this one. So starting with the plot, we get a pretty quick, like a 10-minute long origin story surrounding Gore the God Butcher, Christian Bale's character. And I like the way that Marvel kind of just gets right into the meat. Instead of a elongated build-up throughout the movie for this villain, we just get right into it. We know what the villain's motives are. We know how they came to be, etc. And I think that's a great way to do it in most cases. So after that, we jump over to what's going on with Thor, still trying to figure out his purpose, figure out who he is, kind of sort of thing. He is on some planet that I don't recall right now, but there's a war going on this planet, and he just showcases how he's Thor. He's the best, and he wants people to know it, which is pretty much how his character has been these last few movies that we've seen him in. Guardians of the Galaxy show up early on, and they're gone pretty quickly. So just know that if you were expecting, this back and forth between Peter Quill and Thor, you're not going to get it. They made it kind of seem like that in the trailer, and I was hoping that we were going to get more of that, but we don't. So after we see the Guardians of the Galaxy, they quickly go their separate ways. They depart, and Thor stays with Korg is alongside him, and we get to see, we get a little bit of a hint as to how Gore the God Butcher is starting to kill gods and make an impact and freak a lot of people out. Then we get to see the new Asgard, which is it's like a very touristy town, I would say, in Iceland. It's beautiful where they're located. But yeah, we get some pretty funny moments. I think some of the funnier moments that take place in that town. But that is where we are introduced to Jane Foster, Mighty Thor, played by Natalie Portman, and Gore the God Butcher shows up, and they have this showdown. He gets away and kidnaps some children. Well, actually, not just some, a good amount. And right off the bat, we know that this is an issue, and it has to be dealt with pretty quickly because Gore the God Butcher is not going to stop. and seems to be a pretty good matchup for Thor. And in this town, we also have Valkyrie that teams up with Thor and Jane Foster and Korg. And moving along in the story, they need to stop Gore the God Butcher, get back these children from New Asgard. And so they're traveling around the universe. They stop, I guess, to like the God planet, I'll call it. I forget what it's called. And they're pretty much just asking Zeus for help and the other gods, and they're not getting it. So this kind of shows how fearful how fearful the gods are starting to become of Gore the God Butcher, and kind of don't want to deal with them and just hope that they'll be safe. And Thor knows that he has to stop them. So speaking of stop, I will stop there. I think that kind of sums up the plot overall. I wanted to get into the characters. So first one I'll talk about is Taika Waititi as Korg. Very quickly, this character doesn't stray away. The writing is probably the best writing for any of the characters throughout this whole movie. I thought the lines whenever Korg would speak was, he either had something funny to say or he had something meaningful to say. So this character has a special place in my heart. Tessa Thompson is Valkyrie. She was fine. I had no problem with what she brought to this film, but she just didn't have really those standout moments, I would say. Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, Mighty Thor. Everyone was looking forward to this. I think there was a writing issue when she did speak. She would make some jokes that were not funny. I really wanted to like this character more, and I like the concept. I like the background. I like the story of how this character has come to be. I just didn't really like how this character was written. I felt like I should have cared about her more in this, and I kind of didn't. I was more focused on this conflict between Gore the God Butcher and Thor and his team. And she has some of the more emotional scenes that are watered down with quick jokes that come in 30 seconds after these emotional scenes. And I felt like this wasn't the best introduction to this character, is what I'm saying. Christian Bale as Gore the God Butcher. I would say this was the highlight of the whole film. When he was on screen, everything was escalated. It's just the eeriness, the sense of how powerful this villain is, even though the stature of him is not that great in comparison, especially to Thor. You know what kind of threat this villain is. And for a Marvel movie, I would say this was one of my favorite villains to come out of this franchise. I think when we think about Marvel villains, MCU villains, not Marvel villains, but, in the movies, the thing people always bring up is, okay, did this villain raise the stakes? Were they truly a threat? And a lot of the times these villains, besides Thanos, just seem like they're easily defeatable. Their motives are predictable. And yeah, they just never really hold up, and they're gone one movie after another. And I know for DC movies, you could say the same thing. Let's talk about Black Mask and Birds of Prey. But not to digress, I did really like the villain that we had here. Christian Bale brought some of the most memorable scenes that we had in this. Lastly, we have Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Ultra jacked, as you might have seen in the trailers. Had some funny lines, but this wasn't one of my favorite performances from him. I think it may have been driven by the writing and how everything needed to be a joke, and it really overshadowed the seriousness to the events that were happening. And at times I'm just like, we get it. We know you have this awkward relationship now with Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, but you need to go deal with some more pressing things, like all the kids that were just taken by Gore the God Butcher, and figure that out. But they were just centering everything around the humor, which I'll get to. But not my favorite Chris Hemsworth Thor. All right. Visually and cinematically, some really cool looking shots that we had in this. Of Of course, they're going to bring the effects. This like god planet that we're taken to, where Zeus is. That was really cool to see. And there were a few scenes where, as they're approaching Gore the God Butcher and engaging in battle with him, everything is, all the colors are sucked out of the surrounding atmosphere. And I thought those shots were really well done. And even when the color was sucked out, you also had like the sound. I don't know how to really describe it, but the sound was like muted and distorted. But those were some of the cooler scenes that we had. And one thing I will mention with Gore the God Butcher, some people were picking apart the character design. I get it. I haven't gone through and read all the comics, the Jason Aaron run and things like that. But I thought they did a fine job. Like, you're always going to find a character where you compare and you're like, oh, they could have done this differently. He looks like a bunk ass Voldemort or whatever. But I did like the way he was portrayed. And there are scenes where you're brought into this colorless atmosphere, and his eyes are sometimes the only things that are vibrant. They're like this creepy yellow. So I did think this movie was well shot. The soundtrack was not Thor Ragnarok soundtrack. I know we had Guns N' Roses and people are just beating us over the head with every time they post a review. It's Sweet Child of Mine. But it was like 2 Guns N' Roses soundtrack. I think Paradise City was one. Sweet Child of Mine. There was a scene where we were in Heimdall's son, Axel's room, and he had a poster of one of the Guns N' Roses albums. Like, I felt like those were the only soundtracks we had in this whole film. I can't recall anymore. But it wasn't like Ragnarok where I was like, oh my God, Immigrant Song at the end. That was the perfect way to wrap it up. There was never a moment where the music really elevated a scene, because we had that music throughout the trailer and we knew it was coming. Taika Waititi as the director. I was kind of let down, man. I believe he might have done some directing in Endgame, but I believe the only other movie, and leave a comment if I'm wrong, was Ragnarok within the MCU franchise. And as I said, that was, I would say, a top 5 MCU movie for me. I think what this movie did, it tried to be too funny. It was trying to be funny at the worst moments, where Ragnarok was funny at the right moments. And because of that, it was like the emotional scenes, I was taken out of those. 10 seconds later, we had a childish joke that was just overshadowing all the serious emotional scenes that we had in this. And when I say childish too, it's like at the beginning of the movie, I'm like, this, I could see like a 15-year-old, there was a dad sitting next to me with his maybe 9-year-old son. And I'm like, this could be a good movie to actually take your kids to, besides Gore the God Butcher being uber creepy. But then they just kind of shifted gears in one scene, particularly with the comedy. There was a scene with Zeus and he makes a comment about some of the girls behind him. And it's just like super sexual. And I'm like, you had all these jokes that they didn't really nail the majority of them. A lot of them fell flat. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know why they chose to do some of the jokes that they did. It's like, oh my God, this one was just really awkward, and they were reaching. I think they saw the success they had with Ragnarok, and they're like, we need more of this. And you can clearly get an understanding of that. There's one scene where they brought back one of the best quick moments, cameos in Ragnarok, and they just extended it and they beat us over the head with it. And it was like, okay, we get it, man. We get it. This was like a parody, this whole movie. That kind of bummed me out. I think they just overdid it. I don't think it was funny. This is kind of what I'm saying. There were humorous scenes, but in comparison to the amount of jokes they were trying to land and the ones that actually landed, wasn't funny. And I'm kind of let down by that because I know Taika I think he did the majority of the writing. I think one other person did some of the writing with him, but I don't even think he did a lot of the writing in Ragnarok. I think he mainly just directed. So he directed and wrote this one. And I do enjoy, his Our Flag Means Death. That's on HBO. I do enjoy his other works like Jojo Rabbit and things like that. And knowing that he wrote this and just how bad some of the jokes were, I'm like, dude, come on. Ugh. All right, to sum it up, we do this on my podcast, The Chumpcast. We do see it, save it, or skip it. I think this is a save it, meaning I think you guys don't need to see this in the theaters. I think this is a perfectly fine movie to wait till it comes out on some sort of streaming or whatever. Wait to watch it at home. It is not my favorite MCU movie, not my favorite Thor movie by any means. I think it's just above Dark World. Runtime is about 2 hours long, which is nice for a film like this. I'm not sitting there for 2.5 hours just waiting for something to happen and just hearing more and more jokes. So the 2 hour runtime was nice. And before I head out, one thing I don't think I really touched on much was Natalie Portman's role as Mighty Thor. And yeah, I think a lot of her performance was overshadowed by some of the writing. It was like, hey, we need to make a joke out of this, even though how serious your situation is. And I don't think they did a great job with this character. I would like to see her come back in some extent. I don't know if we will. But yeah, that was kind of a downer as well for me. She looks super badass as Mighty Thor in her suit. And she really showed how impactful she was on the battlefield and, during fights. So that was cool to see, and how that intimidated Thor, Chris Hemsworth, sing that, which was funny to see because nothing really phases the guy when it comes to, strength and being top dog, I'll call it. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's because of Natalie Portman, her performance. I would say it's just what they did with the character in this movie was my favorite. All right, well, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little movie talk about Thor, Love and Thunder. If you want to go see it in theaters, don't let me stop you. I think we're going to get a lot of differing opinions on this, mainly surrounding the humor in it. I thought it wasn't that funny. I'm sure a lot of people, this is right up their alley. So be it. But don't let me stop you if you want to go watch this in theaters. Visually, it's a really nice looking movie, and we have some new characters that are worth seeing. But I think you guys could wait. That's up to you. Well, that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you guys for sticking around. Again, please click that subscribe button down below. Hit that like button, all that good stuff. Support the show. I really appreciate it. Till next time, peace.